Welcome back to another reaction video on The Chosen. Today we're going to be reacting to Season 2, Episode 4, which, depending on when you're catching this review or reaction, will either be a few hours or several days or even weeks from that. But if you catch this review or reaction early enough, you can still watch the episode on YouTube or Facebook. They're only going to leave it up there for 24 hours. Uh, they're really pushing everybody to the app. So on the app, it's going to be available. And you can understand why they want to push everybody to the app. They're trying to make money. They're trying to get this whole series accomplished. And having everybody in one place will do that much more effectively. So you can catch it on YouTube for less than 24 hours, but then you can download the app and catch it on the app. So, Season 2, Episode 4, here we go. It begins with a boy climbing a tree and a twig or branch breaking, and the boy falls to the ground and is seemingly paralyzed. And what we'll see in this opening montage, which lasts about 10 minutes, is the difference in lives that this paralytic lives and his brother lives. So his brother is going to grow up with a great disdain for the Romans, and he's going to grow up training in knife fighting so that he can fight against the Romans. And if we know anything about kind of the backstories or what we know of the disciples biblically, there's one Simon who's called Simon the Zealot, and the Zealots were a group of supreme nationalists who would go around engaging those who were not uh, of Israel living in the land, and especially the Romans, and assassinating them. Now, Zealots is kind of an umbrella term for a lot of different people, but there was a group within the Zealots called the Sicarii, and we know who the Sicarii were because of the early historian Josephus, and they were so called because of their short sword that they wore, about a 9-inch long sword that they wore on their thigh, and would go around crowds, would go around publicly assassinating people. Okay, so this is not a nice group of people, but this is the way the one brother is raised up to the point where he's supposed to carry out an assassination when he gets older, in the present day of this episode. But this episode primarily is setting up not only the introduction of Simon the Zealot, but also the healing that will take place at the Bethesda pools. And this is a healing that is recorded for us in the 5th chapter of the Gospel according to John. And Jesus and the disciples are meant to be in Jerusalem at this point for one of the feasts. Okay, so the first 10 minutes or so of the episode has these boys growing up, and how differently, right? The paralytic, the boy who's paralyzed, grows up lying on a mat, and he's watching all of the other kids play. Sometimes the kids will involve him, but not other times. But how differently they grow up, how eager this child is to walk again. And there's no speaking throughout this entire montage. It's all it draws you in with the film work, and it draws you in with the acting, and it's really, really well done. But as we get to present day, we see that Jesus and the disciples and everyone else is going up to Jerusalem for the Feast of Tabernacles, also known as the Feast of Booths or Sukkot. And this is a 7-day long feast. It is one of the 3 travel feasts, right? Everybody was meant to travel to Jerusalem for this 7-day long feast, which commemorated, which remembered God's being with his people during the wilderness wanderings after the Passover, but before they entered into the Promised Land. So that really sets the stage for the episode. Now, since they are going up to Jerusalem, we are reintroduced to Shmuel from season 1, who we saw in Capernaum, who was coming down from Jerusalem, but he was the early antagonist of Jesus. We see him teaching, warning people, saying, look, everybody's coming up to Jerusalem. There's going to be false prophets around, which he's speaking of Jesus. So uh, it sets the stage for introduction of a disciple, more healing, and the antagonists of Jesus during this feast. So there's quite a bit going on, quite a bit to keep straight, but it's not impossible. And I think the episode pulls together well. Now, as Jesus walks with a few of his disciples into the city, he's walking in and he sees several men who are being crucified right outside the city. And this is something. It's a very powerful scene, seeing Jesus see crucifixion, and the camera work here is done very well. Um, and it also brings to reality that crucifixion was much more common than just Jesus on the cross. It happened all the time, and this is where people would be crucified, right outside the gates of the city, right outside. So when people entered, they were reminded, do the right thing, don't mess up, or this will be you before the day is out. They arrive at the Bethesda pool. So Jesus only takes with him a few of his disciples. He takes John, Matthew, and Peter with him at this point. So they get into the city, they get to the pools, and as they begin to see what's going on there, John takes out his notebook and starts to write, right? It's an interesting thing because John is the only gospel writer who documents the healing at the pools of Bethesda. So for him to be the one to take out a notebook and start writing is a nice touch here. Uh, the end of the episode gets kind of quick. The assassination plot that Simon's involved with is supposed to play out, but Simon sees his brother walking by after having been healed, and he stops. He doesn't carry out the assassination, and he doesn't because his brother had just told him, right? Uh, well, when they were kids, his brother had said, "Look, when you walk, I'll know that the Messiah has come." So when he sees him walking by in the background, he stops the assassination. He doesn't do it. Uh, the Pharisees then begin to plot, and Jesus and Matthew and Peter and John walk out, and Matthew asks Jesus. He says, "Look, why didn't you just wait 30 minutes until the Sabbath was over?" Because, right, the story in John 5 plays out where everybody's stirred up because it was the Sabbath, and this man was carrying his mat on the Sabbath. He said, "Why didn't you just wait 30 more minutes until the Sabbath was over? What difference would 30 minutes make to this paralytic?" And Jesus says, "Sometimes you got to stir up the water," which is another nice touch for the healing at the pools of Bethesda, which we'll get to momentarily. So that's a brief summary. Let's get into some strengths of the episode. One major strength, and this carries really throughout, is the tremendous work that they're doing with the filming and the scenery. I mean, this is like big budget stuff, right? They really draw you into these cities the way the scenery is done. It's not. I mean, if you watched it 10 or 15 times, I'm sure you could start finding things out of place. But just to watch it, you're really really drawn in. Really well done here. Uh, there is a scene where all the people are sitting around the table. Women included, Mary, the mother of Jesus, included as well. And there's a question about a prophecy that speaks about Jews and Gentiles dwelling together in peace, celebrating the feasts together. And the disciples are thinking, well, this is an impossible prophecy. And Mary has one of her quotes that's fantastic. She says, "I know a thing or two about prophecy that seemed impossible." And nobody says anything, and Jesus says, well, "Any more questions?" Right? I mean, but that's the thing. One of the things that does for us is when we read those things about Jews and Gentiles dwelling together, we say, "Oh yeah, Jesus came and died for all." But to see what a scandal that would have been early on for to say to Israel that Gentiles too would be saved. This is a a big thing. It's something for us to consider. It brings us then back into the text and causes us to examine the world in which these people lived. The one thing that really stands out to me in this episode as a strength is that as Jesus came into the world in his ministry, we see all of these different people being healed, being cleansed, demons being cast out of, raised from the dead, right? We see this all over. But what we don't see is everyone being healed. Now, everybody we see comes to Jesus or that Jesus goes to is healed, but not everyone. Not all the lepers were cleansed. Not all the deaf were made to hear during Jesus' ministry. We see this at the Bethesda pools. We see all of these people who are in need of healing at this point. But Jesus goes specifically to the one and heals him and then walks away. This is not somehow saying that Jesus is not gracious and merciful or something like this, but it shows the reality of what Jesus is doing in his ministry, right? He's not primarily coming to heal. He's primarily coming to preach. Now, the healings, though, do show that in Jesus, a new creation is being brought about, but only a foretaste, right? Because we're still waiting for the end when all the lepers will be cleansed, when all the deaf will hear, when all the paralytics will walk. But for now, right, for now, we get a sample, we get a foretaste, and that is something that the episode really pulls out very, very well from my perspective. As far as weaknesses are concerned, and maybe some of these are a little nitpicky again, but I do have one major thing here, which I'll get to momentarily. Now, I know with filmmaking, you don't really want to draw the attention away from the main thing that's going on, but when they portray the crucifixion here, uh, they've done a real disservice to crucifixion. Because crucifixion is not just guys propped up on poles, screaming out every now and then. It's where we get the word excruciating from. It's agonizing. The people their bones are dislocating. They're moving up and down, constantly trying to get one gasp of a breath of air. So to portray this as just kind of guys strapped to poles is doing a significant disservice to what crucifixion is. And I know they probably want to hold this off until Jesus is crucified, but if you're going to introduce it, if you're going to show it, you got to at least have the guys moving around a little bit to get that breath of air. They just have it, they have these guys up there looking like, and maybe I'll go back and watch, maybe they were dead, I don't know, but they just have the guys up there propped up, kind of standing on a platform, and that's it. So I didn't really like that very much. The scene where John takes out a notebook and starts writing is interesting to me, and maybe I'm ignorant here, but to write in those days, paper, papyrus, anything like this, super expensive. Not that they didn't have money, but just to whip out a notebook and a pen and to start writing. We know that a lot of these guys who wrote were not their own, like they had scribes to write, so that they could write smaller, so that they wouldn't have to use up so much papyrus, and it would be not as expensive. Second of all, I'm not so sure about the writing utensils then, but my understanding that you had to have like ink, like an ink well to dip ink in, that you just didn't whip out a notebook and a pen and start writing. So maybe that's a nitpick. The bigger thing that I have with this, though, is if they're going to portray John as having a notebook and a pen as he follows Jesus around, what was the point of a previous episode? What was it? Episode 2 in the series, or episode 1, where John is interviewing everybody, trying to figure out their stories. And if he's going to be documenting as he goes, why did he have to bring everybody together to ask them their stories to then come about and write his gospel? So just kind of a continuity thing there that I don't know. Maybe they'll play it out, maybe not. Doesn't matter. I don't guess. But just something that stuck out to me. Now, the more these episodes go on, the more it's starting to remind me of the New Testament Apocrypha. And if you've not, you may have heard about the Old Testament Apocrypha, like with the Maccabees and all of this, but there actually is a New Testament Apocrypha, which is an interesting thing. And several of these books seem to be concerned about weaving everyone's stories together so that by the time you get to the New Testament, it's like, oh yeah, I remember that story from their childhood, right? It starts to weave these stories together where Jesus is actually playing with some of his disciples in childhood before they're his disciples. Um, and the way these stories are weaving together is kind of like the New Testament Apocrypha. And I know it's done for the sake of the story, but there are too many who are watching, I believe, who are taking these backgrounds as gospel truth, who don't know enough about the Bible and aren't going to open the Bible. And I know it's done for dramatic effect. I know it's a show. I get it. But I wonder if the goal is to get people to Jesus and to get people in the scriptures, I wonder if there's more harm being done in the long run with biblical literacy and almost creating another apocrypha who, when they go and see John chapter 5, the pools at Bethesda, they'll say, "Oh, I know that's Simon the Zealot's brother." When that kind of stuff is irreversible. So I don't know how necessary it is to weave everybody's story like that together, or how just putting the 12 in there in the beginning would have gone. I don't know. Not my show, but just some thoughts there. And finally, my biggest issue with the episode, and again, I like the episode, I like the series, but my biggest issue with this episode is the entire way that they've portrayed the John 5 story. Because they have turned the Bethesda pools into a pagan site. Basically, it seems like a site where people are following superstition instead of the one true God. Starting this thing that the bubbling up of the water as some sort of natural phenomena, like you would see, out west in Yellowstone or something like this. What do the scriptures say? Well, let's see what the scriptures say. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed. One man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. Gets it, right? When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been lying there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, and when I am going, another steps down before me." Jesus said, "Get up, take up your bed, and walk." At once, the man was healed and took up the bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath, so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. It's not lawful for you to take up your bed." But he answered them, "The man who had healed me, that man said to me, 'Take up your bed and walk.'" So they asked, who was that man? Now, what the story tells us is that the angel of the Lord would stir up this water. Okay, an angel of the Lord would stir up the water. So it's not telling us that there is some sort of pagan thing going on. Now, this is right. They wait for the moving of the water. For an angel of the Lord went down and stirred up the water. Right. You might not have in your Bibles. You may see that your Bibles actually skip from verse 3 to verse 5 there, if you don't catch it. But uh, an angel of the Lord went down at certain seasons and stirred up the water, and the first person in would be healed. So the Bible tells us that an angel of the Lord is responsible for this. So is it an angel of the Lord? Maybe they're trying to show that this verse is not in some manuscripts of of the Bible, and maybe they're showing that it shouldn't be in the Bible. Um, I don't know. Right? Once again, there aren't too many actual Bible stories that have been involved here. Yet, just like with the Nicodemus story, another one is kind of twisted out of context. Like if you're going to tell the Bible stories, show me the Bible story. Right? Show me the Bible story. So those are just a few thoughts from my perspective on the episode. I like it. I mean, I like the way it's coming together, but that's coming from me, right? I mean, we're sitting here studying the scriptures every single day. We're teaching the scriptures every single day, right? I knew as soon as the episode started, and this isn't to praise me or whatever, but this is what we do for a living. I'm wondering how it's affecting other people if they're actually getting into the Bible. So this is the goal: get into the Bible, hear from the Bible who Jesus is, what He's done for these people, and continue to enjoy the series. We'll keep reviewing. I'll keep watching. But until next time, we'll see you. Like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me what you thought of the episode down below. It'd be good to hear from you and to see what you thought. See you next time.